Everyone, this is Jack Allwell with another Money episode. Today we have special guest Dr. Stacy Mastrolia. She's a Ph.D. of Accounting and professor at Bucknell University. Stacy, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be here.
So before we get into some tactics on saving during inflationary times and a bit about the student debt repayment and coming back, why don't we start out and get a glimpse into what your relationship was like with money growing up?
I learned really early that work meant money. And I did everything from babysitting to throwing newspapers to fast food service to waitressing to fixing typewriters. I don't think there was a time after when I was about 12 that I didn't work. But, work meant money and money meant financial independence. And that was always really important to me, even when I was younger. So once I had money, I realized that I actually like nice things. So I'm particularly deliberate about not saving or not spending on things that I don't really care about so that I can indulge in the things that I really do care about. And then that's, really worked well for me for years. And now I feel like I can splurge on what I want to do. And I don't really miss the things that I've chosen to cut out.
Awesome. Were there any specific things that your parents did or rules they had that kind of ingrained that into you?
Well, I think just being one of four and being in a very, middle-class family, if you wanted anything extra, you had to earn the money to get it. So, obviously food was always provided, clothes was always provided, but, if you wanted something nicer or you wanted something extra, we were taught to, work for it.
And how did your three siblings, are they pretty similar to you, or have they gone different path?
Yeah, I think we're kind of 2 and 2. So 2 of us are kind of the same and 2 of us are kind of uniquely different, but then the same as well. So there's a lot of personality in my family. But my brother and I kind of went more of a money route. My brother was a financial advisor for a while and worked on Wall Street for a while. And now he's in compliance at a bank. And my other 2 sisters are more creative. One is a singer and the other was in many different roles. So yeah, my brother and I were kind of similar and my sisters were kind of similar.
So, and like I said before, you do have a PhD of accounting. I don't know many of those. Can you describe that decision-making process, how you elected to go down that path and what kind of drove that decision?
Yeah, so I was a CPA for about 15 years working in public accounting and then in corporate accounting. And you don't really need a PhD in accounting unless you want to teach at the university level. So I felt a calling to teach about 15 years into my career and had gotten the very valid advice from a college professor that I thought with a CPA and 15 years experience, you just go teach. Like I thought that was that, right? But I was given the very useful advice, very truthful advice that if you want to build a career as a teacher, as a college professor, then you really need to have the PhD, that's the price of admission. So I took myself back to PhD school at the University of Tennessee. I think I was the oldest PhD student there ever. But it didn't matter because like that thing about, oh, you're going to be 4 years older anyway. Well, it's true. 4 years later, I was still a doctor, even though I was like the oldest one that ever graduated from our program. And so then I came up here to teach at Bucknell and I've been here this is my 15th year.
Awesome. Now, when you said you kind of had a calling or you were kind of pulled into it, like what did you see in society that made you think like, yes, I need to go teach or I want to do this?
Yeah, so it was back in early 2000, like 2003-ish. And that was right after Sarbanes-Oxley. So it was right after the big corporate frauds of Enron and WorldCom and all of that. And when you're an accountant, I was a corporate controller at the time. When you're an accountant and all of this is going on in our industry, and then Sarbanes-Oxley was a law that Congress passed that turned the public accounting profession from being self-regulated to being government regulated. Like that was like, and kind of left me feeling confused as to whether or not this was a career that I could still find as much joy in. And at the time I had gone back to earn my MBA, which was necessary at my company to move to like that next director level. So here I was all of a sudden thrown back into academia, earning an MBA with, at the time, 14 years of business experience. It was a wonderful program, but it wasn't particularly challenging academically, where when I was in my undergrad, I was like all student. Like I went to all my classes, I did all my homework, and was very diligent, and that's what I needed to do well. But I didn't need that in the MBA program. So I'm sitting back and watching how people interact and how people ask questions and how they were answered. And it like there was an art to teaching that I had never appreciated when I was 100% student. And I just thought it was really cool that the teacher could, somebody to ask a question, they'd answer it, and then there'd be a follow-on question that twist it just a little bit and then answer the question in a different way. And then a follow-on question, they twist a little bit and answer a different way. And I'm like, that is really cool. So that was kind of what was introduced to me as the way that I wanted to do something different. And I always liked to teach. I just never thought I would do it as a profession.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, let's get into the guts of the discussion. So I think a lot of people are seeing their expenses increase. Unfortunately, a lot of their wages are not growing at the same clip. So I think a lot of people are feeling pinched. What can you tell us about saving during these inflationary times?
Yeah, I think there's never been a time that it's more important to make sure we have a spending plan, which is a budget. But it's people who don't like the B word, we can call it a spending plan. So all it is a plan for how you're going to spend all of your money at the beginning of the month when you're calm, cool, and collected. You're not hungry, you're not tired, you're not frustrated, and you make a conscious decision as to how you want that month's money to be spent. And that's necessary because otherwise we don't really know how much we can save. As much as we can have rules that pay yourself first and first 10% and all that. But in the end, when prices go up, it doesn't always make sense to save 10% and be hungry, right, by the 25th when we run out of groceries. So the spending plan lets us make sure that all of our money is doing what we want it to do. And some of it is saving. So even though we might be saving less, there's inflation. The opposite side of inflation is always higher interest rates. So when we have inflationary times, we end up with higher interest rates. And that's dangerous and difficult if you're trying to borrow money. People who are, trying to buy a house are finding that it's much more expensive. But if you're one of the people who has money to invest or to save, high yield savings accounts right now are paying, pretty decent rate of interest compared to where they might have been since 2008 and interest rates had gone down so much. So if your budget says you can save, then using things like high yield savings accounts or CDs, very safe ways to save your money for a period of time. And for some people, it is kind of waiting out. Maybe you have your house deposit, but you're waiting out the housing market to see if interest rates will come down, or maybe the housing market prices will come down a little bit more. So you don't necessarily want to put your money into the market and risk your principal. But when you're sitting on the sidelines, it doesn't have to earn 1 or 2% right now. You can find 4 and even 5% on high yield savings accounts. Very safe.
Mm-hmm. And so if someone, let's say they want to start constructing a plan to save a house, maybe they think they need 2-3 years, but who knows what house prices are going to be. How do you go about constructing a type of strategy to go about saving for a down payment?
Yeah. So first you have to figure out kind of how much house you want or that you can afford, right? So say somebody thinks they want to buy a $500,000 house. So how much do you need to put as a down payment? And it depends if you are a VA. If you can get a VA loan, then that might be no money down. If you're going to get a traditional loan, it might be 10% down. If you can scrape up 20% down, you can avoid PMI, private mortgage insurance, which will cost you several $100s a month. So you kind of figure out how much you think your house price is going to be and how much you think you need as a down payment. And then there's a lot of online time value of money calculators that will help you determine what your payment would be on the balance. And then once you have those numbers, that's where reality kind of hits and you say, oh, $3,000 a month with $40,000 down. That's a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. And so do you want to buy less house or do you want to try and put a bigger down payment? So you start kind of moving those pawns until you find the sweet spot. But once you know what your down payment is, I'll use $36,000 for an easy number to divide. If you have 3 years, that's going to be $3,000 a month for 3 years to save up $36,000, excluding interest. If you're not going to invest it in the market and you're just going to put it in a high yield savings account, then you kind of figure that interest is gravy because you're not going to make enough to make the difference of a month's payment. But you can still make some on the money that you're saving. But once you know the down payment, it's a simple calculation of either divided by how much you can save each month to figure out how many months, or divided by the number of months to figure out how much you have to save each month.
Mm-hmm. What are you, also in terms of just like an emergency fund, what are you kind of recommending these days?
Yeah, that's a great question, because generally we say 3 to 6 months of your necessary expenses. But if you're moving from renting to buying a house, your necessary expenses are going to change. So before you buy the house, you want to make sure you have a proper emergency fund for living in the house, not for living in a rental. Because in a rental, the heating and air goes out, you call the landlord, right? There's a roof leak, you call the landlord. When it's your house, $10,000, boom, for a heating and air system, right? More than that, boom, to fix a roof. Or might have happened to me, dig out the roots from the septic from my house to the street because the tree with the roots, right? I mean, these things happen and drops on you a $5,000 bill. So it's very unwise to move into a house if you don't have 3 to 6 months of your necessary expenses with the new house. But in inflationary times, even people who think they have a fully funded emergency fund are probably a little light right now, because our necessary expenses cost a heck of a lot more now than they did 2 years ago. And if you have 3 to 6 months of your necessary expenses from 2 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, the last time you did the calculation, that may not be nearly enough today to survive a 3-month job loss or an illness, or the kinds of things that we try and use an emergency fund to protect us from.
Shifting gears a little bit to the student loans that are about to come due. I mean, some people haven't made a payment in a while. Some people are about to make their first payment. What should people be thinking about as we're coming to this point?
Yeah, so actually interest. So for federal student loans, those were the ones that were on deferment. The interest started reaccumulating as of September 1st. So we're already 19 days into interest accruing. For most people, payments will start in October. If you haven't already, you should contact your loan servicer and make sure that they have your proper address, that they have your proper income, that they have the information that they need, your bank account information. For a lot of people, things have changed in their life in the past, 2 or 3 years, and going back to the loan servicer, making sure everything is updated, will make you available for, or make your file available for whatever special programs there might be, income-based repayment and the like. They need to have your most updated information for that. The loan servicer should also be able to tell you, or tell anybody, what their payments will be, because anybody who graduated after 2020 or later, they've never made a student loan payment. So potentially they don't even know what their student loan payments would ever have been. So they can find out what the student loan payments are, what the terms are. They can set up automatic withdrawals and transfer, make sure everything gets paid on time, not late. Almost all loan forgiveness programs require that you pay every month on time. So, making sure that that's automated and there'll be no interruption for a lot of people could mean several $1,000s of forgiveness down the road.
Now, a lot of those federal student loans, are most of them fixed rates, or are any of them have a floating rate component to them?
The federal student loans for students are fixed, but they were fixed at the time that the loan was taken out.
Okay.
So for some people, these are rates from 8 years ago, and for some people, these are rates from 2 years ago or 1 year ago. So you could have multiple loans at different rates because they're fixed when the loan is taken out.
Okay.
But they're generally between 5 and 7 or 8% in general.
I mean, how do you kind of see the whole environment with, a lot of people have not been making any payments and now they're going to have to make payments. Like, how do you view the world in which we're in right now?
Well, I mean, thankfully we've had many months to foresee it. So it wasn't dropped on us by surprise. That was a good thing that people had a chance to plan for it. But the average student loan payment, I think, was about $500 when
Okay.
the payments were turned off. So how does a family adjust to taking $500 out of their budget that they were using for something else previously? So if you were using it for saving, then okay, you need to redirect that back towards debt. But for some families, they were using that to put food on the table with inflation. And for those families, they might qualify for a lower payment based on income-based repayment, which is why getting in touch with your servicer and getting that information to them is so important, so that they can take care of before that first payment comes due. Because once that first payment comes due, you need to pay it. And if it can be 200 instead of 700, that's more doable for people who are making less income and would qualify for that plan. So it's really rejiggering the budget again, and maybe even going back to what the budget looked like a number of years ago, which in a lot of ways isn't viable given the levels of inflation.
Do a lot of these loans, and I like I said, I don't know too much about these. So you're talking like, so there are features that they could be altered based on their income?
Yeah, so federal student loans have several special circumstances where you can qualify for a lower payment based on a low income. Typically, it's called income-based repayment. So while your payment mathematically might be $500 a month, your income says that you can only afford to make, say, $200 a month. And those programs are available to anybody who can show what their income is. For some other programs, working in underserved areas, teaching in underserved areas, or certain nurse and doctor responsibilities, military service. There's other programs that are available to certain groups of people. But one of the overarching needs in order to qualify for the plans is that you have to be able to pay on time every time. So that's where the direct deposit or direct withdrawal, something that is procedural to make sure that you don't miss a payment, get sick, have a death in the family, right? Something happens, a car accident, and you forget to make a payment on something. You just get a late fee if it's your credit card, but you get a much higher penalty if you're trying to participate in one of those programs.
Now, when they're actually lowering some of these payments, is it that they're actually lowering the interest rate, or is it kind of just like they're lowering the minimum payment just so you don't get like a ding, but you're still accruing interest at the same rate?
Oh, you ask a wise question, Jack. Yeah, so it's actually in some programs the balance gets larger. You're paying less than the interest, and the balance actually grows. In other cases, they're waiving the difference in the interest. If the amount you're paying is less than just the interest, they'll waive the extra interest, but your debt's not being decreased.
Okay.
In other cases, they're extending the term. They're saying, okay, you're paying this now, and what's left is getting pushed out to the end of the term. So yeah, it's very misleading. You never want to pay the least possible. You want to pay the most that you can afford and still feed your family, right? Because the least possible is how people end up retiring and you're still paying on your student loans. Like, it's just, it'll just never end. You can't bank your federal student loans. Eventually they have to be paid.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there that do have the student loans, make sure you understand if the balance is actually going down and what interest you are paying. So, so if you're comfortable sharing, how are you allocated personally in this environment, and how do you do you plan on shifting depending on seeing something in the future? How does your portfolio look, and how are you positioned?
My investment portfolio?
Yeah, like holistically, everything. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have any debt, so everything I have is open investments. I have right now a good amount of it is in retirement, which I have personally equally split between a Roth and a traditional. So I'll manage I'm a CPA as well as having a PhD in accounting. So I'll manage my taxes in retirement based on the two accounts. The Roth being I pay taxes now and I take it out tax-free later. And the traditional, I have a tax deduction now and I pay taxes on it later. But I personally, I invest in stocks. I'm a single woman. I don't like real estate. I don't like the responsibility of it. I don't fix things. I don't mow things. I don't shovel things. So I have opted out of the real estate market, but I use equities. I use mutual funds. I use index accounts. I use some active managed accounts. But most of my investments are in the market.
Gotcha. Okay. Any like hard at like gold, silver, any of those types of things?
I don't, partly because what I like about the market is when I buy a mutual fund, I'm actually buying those stocks. So I'm buying a piece of, I have a piece of Home Depot. I have a piece of Apple. I have a piece of, I have a piece of all of those companies, and I can understand what they make and what they sell. But something like gold, I don't know who I would sell it to. I don't know who would buy it. I don't know why it has value. Like Home Depot has value because it sells shrubs and they sell wood and they sell, tomato plants. I don't know why gold has value, because it's pretty, because I can make it into something pretty. So I don't, my underlying investment philosophy is to never invest in something that you don't understand. If you can't explain that investment to an intelligent 8-year-old, then you shouldn't be in it, because where you really get in trouble is my guy said, I got a guy who I heard about whatever. But if you don't understand it, then it can, the environment can change, and there's an effect then on your investment, and you are not able to foresee it. So I'm able to foresee, like my Home Depot example, if there's a natural disaster, I'm able to foresee that a lot of people are going to go to Home Depot and buy new shrubs and buy new doors and buy new, wood. And so I can understand what they sell. I never invest in something that I can't explain to an 8-year-old.
Okay, good advice. And that might parlay into our last question. What is the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received?
So I think the best advice I've ever heard is to live beneath your means, right? Whatever your means are, you need to make it work at less than that, or you need to raise your means. But there's no magical math formula. There's no financial product. There's nothing that makes money from nothing. So you have to learn to be content living beneath your means. And that's something that comes up often with my college students and with my financial coaching clients, right? Whatever, I can have somebody who's making $200,000 a year and they can't stay within it. And I have somebody making $40,000 a year and they're saving, steadily for retirement. So it's really, it's a head and a heart game to figure that out. And the second big thing is obviously making a budget, but also tracking to it, because I can make you a beautiful budget, but if you don't track and show that you're actually spending according to that spending plan, then all your budget is a wish. It's something to frame and put up on the wall. It's not actually a document that you're living by. And I think the worst advice is anything that starts with my guy or I got a guy.
Okay.
Anything that you can't understand. I mean, most people are reasonably intelligent, and if somebody explains something to them, they should be able to understand it. And if you can understand it and explain it to somebody else who can then understand it, then that's a potential investment. But if you can't, and all you're told is, well, all the rich people do that, rich, this is how rich people make money. Well, unless you're talking to rich people, and even then, if the rich people can't explain it to you, I'm not sure that that's the right investment, because maybe they just got a guy.
Okay. So you mentioned the tracking your expenses. I'm kind of curious now, because I actually started tracking my net worth before I really looked at my expenses. Do you see, like, in the people you see, is it predominantly tracking expenses? Or because I actually think it's probably easier for most people if they just track their net worth occasionally. How do you kind of view that, and what would you tell someone if they're just starting?
Yeah, so for most of my financial coaching clients, we're starting with trying to understand where their money goes. Excuse me. So in order to do that, you have to track your spending. The end game is to track your wealth, which is tracking your net worth. But before, I mean, you can track your net worth at any point in time, but before you can make changes to your net worth, meaning increasing your investing or investing better or smarter, you have to start by knowing how much you have to invest. So that's the budgeting and the tracking. I have people who will show me their budget and they'll have, say, $1,000 worth of savings in there. And we get to the end of the month and I'm like, okay, well, let's see where's your account that has $1,000 more in it? And there isn't one. They're like, oh, well, I didn't save it. I'm like, well, let me see your budget. And the budget still says $1,000. So, that's just a wish. Then you made a wish. You wish that you'd spent these things so that you had $1,000 left over, but you didn't. So now we have to look at where did your $1,000 of spending actually go? And then make another decision. Are you actually going to cut back on that item or not? Because it's really hard to sacrifice if you don't feel like you're doing it for something. So to say, if you took $200 out of your entertainment budget, that would give you $200 to save. And if you invest that $200 in this way, this is what it can mean to your net worth, right? Then somebody's more motivated to say, yeah, I'm willing to sacrifice. Otherwise, I think we call them sadists, right? Or masochists if you want to sacrifice for no good reason. Like, I'm just going to do nothing this month for no reason, but to say, no, I'm gonna cut back on something this month so that I can fund my Roth account or save for a vacation or have extra money for Christmas or whatever the goal is.
Awesome. Well, Stacy, it's been great chatting with you. Why don't you give the listeners a handoff on where they can go learn more about you or get in touch with you?
Yeah. So my website is profstacythemoneyteacher.com, and Prof Stacy the Money Teacher is my handle on all social media. I am on TikTok and Instagram. I have YouTube videos, obviously my website. So my goal is just to provide free financial literacy to, people. And then I also do financial coaching for clients one-on-one or families or small businesses to the extent that they want more individualized help. And again, it's through profstacythemoneyteacher.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And you're providing a great value.
Thank you, Jack. I enjoyed talking to you.
Yep. Take care.